Okay, welcome to the Executive Scrutiny Board meeting, Tuesday, 6th of October. Do you have any apologies?
Councillor Testro will be about half an hour late.
Who's that, sorry, Councillor?
Testro, James. I've never called him Councillor Testro. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Right, no other apologies. So I have no late items to introduce. So any declarations of interest, please? No. Okay. Item 4: minutes of the minutes of the meetings held on 8th September. You've had those; they are attached. Item 5: forward plan.
I'll move the minutes as printed, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pegg. That's great. Item 5: the forward plan. And a seconder from Lucy was that. Thank you. The forward plan. Any comments on that at all, or it is as it is? If not, item 6: Council Cabinet responses to scrutiny recommendations. That they're also attached. Is there any comments at all on that?
Noted, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pegg.
Me, please, Chair.
7.
Chair.
Sorry, Lucy.
Can I just ask about minute 3720? Which was talking about the publicity to do with recycling. And I haven't seen anything. I don't see every tweet coming out from the council and don't read every missive, but I've not seen anything about being able to recycle more items, which we were asking for. And I just wondered if anything had gone out.
Who's best to respond on this? Would you recommend Stephen? Who's best to respond on it?
I mean, perhaps would be me, Rachel North, to Director of Communities and Place. I'm not sure the answer to that question, but I can find out and do a written response.
That's great. Thank you very much, Rachel.
And Chair, if there hasn't been anything, then to see if we can action it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure Rachel will look into this and get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rachel. Right, moving on. Item 7: Council Cabinet agenda. You've got the papers in front of you. Matters referred, recommendation as executive scrutiny, parent carers needs assessments. So, right, let's have a look. The first real item is item 7. Are there any comments on that recommendation from the executive scrutiny board? If there's not, moving on to item 8, parent carers needs assessment. Who's going to be taking us through this? Item 8.
So I think, hi Chair. I think in this instance here, you'll just note that from a previous meeting of the CYP board made a number of recommendations. So a minute extract will be considered by Council Cabinet tomorrow. Do we have the chair of the CYP
board? So we'll wait until.
Chair.
Right. Yeah, sure. Lucy.
Thank you. This was obviously something that would have been best spoken to by the chair of CYP, who isn't a member of this scrutiny board. And I just wondered whether there was a system by which, in this situation, the chair of a relevant board would be told that this was coming here and given the opportunity to come and attend and speak. Is that something that we could build into the process?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. We can either build it into the process, or if members specifically want a chair or another officer or elected member to come along, please let me know. We'll invite them. So we can do it two ways. We can leave it that we each have responsibility for inviting such people along, or it's built in that, Stephen, if we can send out, if there's something like this, I think Lucy is probably correct, we send out an invite and asking the individual chair, would you like to come along to speak to this? So the invite always goes out to the relevant chairs. But in addition to that, if we specifically want somebody here to the meeting, individual members, please let me or Stephen know and we'll invite them.
Yep, we can sort that, Chair.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you.
Is that okay, Lucy?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on then, item 9.
Chair, I think Councillor Cooper has indicated that he'd like to speak.
Oh, sorry, Rob. Rob, do you want to come in, please?
Thanks, Chair. Just an understanding from my side of things. I thought all chairs of scrutiny boards were automatically come onto the exec scrutiny. Is that right or is that wrong? Sorry to ask such a question, but I just thought I'd seek some clarity.
I can answer that. I can answer that one,
Okay.
Chair. It is local custom and practice that the chairs of the respective scrutiny review boards are appointed to the executive scrutiny board as the overarching committee, but that is not always the case with how the constitutional appointments pan out at the annual meeting. So I think in this case there was perhaps a reason why Councillor Lind, as the chair of CYP scrutiny, couldn't be appointed to executive scrutiny, and so I think a decision was made that appointment was taken up by probably Councillor Kerr or Councillor Willoughby in her place. But that is the local custom and practice, but there's nothing constitutionally mandating that.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. Okay, right, moving on to item 9. Are you taking us through this, Paul? Or Rachel?
I am, Chair. Thank you. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I won't hopefully take too much of your time, but I think obviously this is an issue that's been in the press quite a bit recently, both locally and nationally. The government I guess we've been expecting them for some time to produce a white paper on devolution, and I'll use the phrase local government reform rather than local government reorganisation. And the expectation was that white paper would be forthcoming in the autumn. And just goes to show you how quickly things move in terms of when this report was in its gestation. There has been some suggestion that the white paper is now going to be delayed until perhaps after Christmas, although on a recent call the Secretary of State Robert Jenrick did say that it was still his #1 priority as Secretary of State to bring the white paper forward. So I guess in that context, Chair, this report is seeking the approval of Cabinet to allow officers to go away and prepare a business case on the basis that there could be a white paper forthcoming at some point in the not too distant future that would lead to devolution and local government reform. And the reason I say it in that order is because I think it is quite important that it's easy for us working in local government to be fixated on structures and reorganisation, and actually the prize here is devolution, not really local government reorganisation. I would suggest that's a means to an end rather than an end in itself. And actually, what the devolution agenda is about is, whether you agree with it or otherwise, politically, the government are keen on the levelling up agenda, and devolution certainly is something that I would suggest is quite important for the East Midlands, because there's no doubt that areas like the East Midlands, of which Derby is a fundamental part, being the manufacturing centre for not just the East Midlands, but certainly a significant strategic manufacturing hub for the entire country. But we are missing out. We only have to look down the A38 at what's happening in West Midlands and up the M6 to what's happening in Northwest, in Manchester and Liverpool and areas like that, to see that not only are we missing out in terms of having greater control over local decisions, in terms of powers around transport, the economy, the skills agenda, and of course in some parts of the country greater alignment with the NHS, but we're also missing out on significant amounts of funding. And the government are keen on bringing devolution, so they claim, to areas like the East Midlands. It's one of their ambitions, and they have made it clear that to facilitate something like a combined authority and the possibility of an elected mayor, that local authorities would be expected, or local government would be expected, to reform away from the current two-tier structure that we've got certainly here in the East Midlands. And their view is that to create larger unitary authorities like we're seeing being established in Northamptonshire, not too far down the road, is their preference for the structure of local government going forward, and for there to be created unitary authorities that range in size from somewhere between a kind of optimum population. They call it their landing zone of anywhere between 300 and 600,000 in terms of the overall population. Derby currently is below that number in terms of the population that the council serves, and so you've no doubt seen as well the moves of other authorities in Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, Leicestershire to propose the creation of county-wide unitary authorities. So from our perspective as a city, I think it's important that we respond to that agenda and that we identify the options that are available to us as a city in terms of the possibility of local government reform. So there's lots and lots I could say about this, Chair, but I don't think that's necessarily the right time and place for that. I think that debate would come as and when we brought a paper back to full council, which is what we're asking for here, to seek Cabinet's approval to get support for the work to be done on looking at what the options are, and then once those options have been investigated, researched, evidence-based, which I think is also really, really important, that those options are brought back in front of full council for full council to consider those options for the possibility of some form of local government reform. Very happy to take any questions, Chair.
Yeah, I just make just a few comments before I bring various people in. Due to the importance of this matter, it's beholden on us all to seriously consider all, and I mean all possible options, and to pick the best option for the city and its people. This should not be about party political preference or party political advantage. And to do this, all views of the people in this city and businesses must be heard. Now, these things are not written in tablets of stone. Whether they can or can't be a boundary review or boundary tweaks, neither are these figures. They are woman or man-made, and so I think we need to argue our case, and I certainly will, as a resident of Derby, for the people of Derby. Now, there are some fears out there, Paul, and you know that this land, that some people are calling it a land grab for Amber Valley, Area Wash and South Derbyshire, and that might not be in the best interests of the city in the short, and the medium and long term. Amber Valley has a population of 128,000, Area Wash 150,000, South Derbyshire 107,000. So collectively, those three authorities have 350,000. So with any new authority, the councillors that represent that 350,000 would have a majority potentially over any decisions that were made. And their focus, understandably, would not be Derby focused, and their priorities would not be Derby centric. Now, the people of Derby need to be fully aware of that before we jump over to some sort of system where somehow we're linked in with Ena, Ripley, Swaddlingcoat, etc., etc. So, what I would advise is that caution, and I would advise and recommend that we have full consultation with the people of Derby, and this is an approach in a non-party political way, with us all being champions of the people of Derby. Now, okay, first person, Councillor Tester has just joined the meeting. Anybody want to make any comments at all? Lucy?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Thanks for that introduction, Paul. I find this a very difficult situation because I personally don't like the way the government is putting lots of power into the hands of individual elected mayors and taking them away from the wider democratic group of people who are elected. And I believe that many heads coming together from a disparate range of backgrounds, even if you don't always see eye to eye, is actually a better way of getting the best thing for a wider number of people. So I'm afraid I start by saying I don't like the direction the government's taking, but we have a government that is going in a particular direction, and therefore we do need to listen to what's happening. And I think we need to respond to it. Otherwise, we are just going to be trodden on and pushed around, and that isn't right either. So yes, I'm very happy to. I think you're right that we should be putting something together. I think we should be, as you say, working with our sister councils in the local area. They don't actually feature in your timeline at the end of the report as to where their consultation comes in and how they meld in. I couldn't see that in your description, and I think that needs some clearer guidance. And I think they also need to, if we're going to genuinely work with them, then we need to give them the space to be able to alter our timeline, to amend what's going on, and similar things. Otherwise, we are just doing to them instead of the government doing to us. And I think that needs to be a shared endeavour. I like what Martin's saying about not making us too big, but I think we obviously need to include all the bits that are around Derby, and I think we need to be prepared to break up some of the existing local government areas so that we can take in the bits and sufficient land for us to not fall into the situation we've been in for the last 5-10 years, where a lot of what has been built on the edge of us and not within us. So we need to have enough space to be able to breathe and to expand for over probably the next 30 to 50 years, given the slow timescale for local government boundary changes. And I think that is important, and that needs to be part of the brief. But fundamentally, I don't like the idea of the business case for doing this. I don't think it should be a business case. I think we should be looking at democracy, at accountability, at transparency, community and identity. And those are the things that really matter to people. If democracy means anything, then we need to be not looking at the business case, which is very narrow, but we need to be, and obviously the economy is important, but we need to be looking broader. And we need to be looking at people-centred and how we work better at valuing our democracy and making it meaningful to people. So we also need to, it would be good also to see how councillor involvement is going to be included within the consultation process. I think it's something that representatives from each group need to be involved in. But I will put together some recommendations on those principles of democracy and accountability. And I'd love you to, I really want to get the word business case out of the way. Let's get rid of the business case and just talk about the case for change, because it should be much wider than just business.
Thank you.
So I'll come up with a recommendation, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Steve and then Fareed.
Chair,
Okay.
sorry, Chair. Can I just respond to Councillor Kerr's comment?
Which would you prefer to do, Paul? Respond to each one or respond to a couple? If you prefer to respond directly, that's fine.
Well, the trouble is I'll probably forget what she said.
Okay, that's fine, Paul. Yeah, okay. Sorry, Fareed, I'll take Paul now. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. No, it's just to say, and the same applies to the comments you made at the beginning, Chair. It's obviously nothing I would disagree with there in terms of we've got to do this right. I would absolutely agree with that. I think just to say, specifically in relation to Councillor Kerr's comment about the business case, it's just a terminology. That's all it is. It's just the term we are using for the case for change. Call it what you will. I don't really mind. If you want to call it something different, that's fine by me. We've called it a business case. It's not just about the business rationale for it. It absolutely has to take on board all the things that you've said around democracy, accountability, serving local people, because that's what fundamentally this has to be about. This has to be about what is best for residents. Where you draw the line is up for debate. I think and I know that the chair's put some comments in the chat about, the kind of absorbing the obvious areas like Mickleover, the ones we all know about, Borrowwash and the rest, in terms of where there have been, people are building on our borders, which is a challenge, as we all know. I think the only not slight challenge, the challenge with that is, as we understand it, and we'll have to wait and see what the white paper comes out with, but as we understand it, the rules are that you cannot go outside existing administrative boundaries. You can't kind of pick and choose and chop bits off. That's a problem. But nonetheless, it's something that
changed.
Yeah, absolutely. I get that. And we can obviously explore that. All I'm saying is what I'm being told by those in the know is that's how it will work. But absolutely, we will certainly ask that question. So thank you for the opportunity to respond, Chair.
Okay,
Chair, may I just come back very briefly on that?
Very briefly, Lucy, because others want to come in. Yeah, thank you.
In that, when we became a unitary authority and then we reviewed our number of councillors, we were the only unitary authority in change in that tranche where they allowed us to have an increase in the number of councillors, because we had agreement across the board that 44 councillors was not sufficient for the city. So you can buck what they're saying from the centre. You just need to put a really good case for it.
Lucy's absolutely right. Would I put it on the screen? That is a recommendation which I'd like to be debated and voted on later on. But let's have a conversation first of all, because other people want to come in. So I've got now Stephen and then Fareed.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me now, Chair. Can you? I hope everybody can hear me. Brilliant.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you. I think I would like to echo particularly your comments and those of Councillor Kerr, because one thing that's very key about Derby, and I pointed it out recently at full council, I think as well, is that the state of Derby Council is actually one of no overall control. That's how we're regarded from outside. Obviously, the largest group is forming a minority administration at the moment, and over the years since I've been involved with Derby City Council, it mostly probably, apart from obviously it's been either a small majority for the Labour group, or it has been under no overall control, and different parties have sort of formed the administration within that. So therefore, I'm just wondering in this whatever you want to call it, business case, options, or whatever, what plans are there really in drawing up these proposals? I know you said it's going to come to full council, but what plans are there, given the status of Derby City Council, no overall control? What plans are there to actually take a cross-party approach to the development of the business case? And you're involving all of the, as obviously it goes out to consultation amongst the residents, but you're involving all of the political groups in this, and not just the cabinet and the controlling administration. Paul,
did you want to come back or?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Willoughby. It's a good question. Obviously, before we got to this point, we've briefed the 4 group leaders about our intention to bring the report. There seemed to be, from my perspective anyway, and if I've got that wrong, then so be it. But the sense I had is that all 4 group leaders were in support of the principle of bringing the report. Whether everybody agrees with it or not in terms of the outcome, obviously will remain to be seen. But I think it's our absolute intention to make this as wide-ranging a discussion and debate and preparation of a business case as we can. Local people's knowledge and interest in this is going to be high on the agenda, and clearly, local councillors, in terms of your representation of the communities that you serve, that's going to be important. So I see no reason why this can't be something that as time goes by, we perhaps bring it, perhaps a draft of the business case or something like that back to your committee chair. I'd be comfortable with doing that. I see no reason why that couldn't happen. And obviously it will probably be a regular item on the agendas for the group leader conversations as well. And if there's other ways and means in which we can engage councillors in the discussion, then I'm very happy to listen to them.
What I'm concerned about, Paul, and I'll bring Fareed in very shortly, is just undue haste, because undue haste will change at speed and repent at leisure. And I think none of us want that. So don't let us be tied like we were with certain of these COVID road schemes to a timeline that then backfires and officers are replying to thousands of people objecting. So, you know, it's important, Paul, I'm sure you would accept, and we must convince the current administration to do it properly and take whatever time it takes to do it properly as well. But to be set like some false deadline of a few weeks or months is in nobody's interest. Fareed, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry, there are a couple of clarifications that I'm looking for. First of all, is it now definite that we will have an East Midlands mayor, including Derby, Leicester, Nottingham? And are we doing this in preparation for that materializing? Or is this not connected with the bigger change in terms of having one mayor for East Midlands? Because the kind of authority we might need, which will be more effective for us, will depend on whether or not the mayoral model, East Midlands mayor, goes ahead or not. If that doesn't go ahead, then obviously if we have a slightly larger authority and we've got more devolved powers to make our own decisions, we will probably need a slightly different type of council than would be the case if there was a mayor who was guiding broader policy issues concerning transport, regional links, local economies, because they'll be mainly driven by the elected mayor, and then we will be assisting the mayor at the top with the vision that he or she may come up with in that sense. So in some respects, I think we are perhaps jumping the gun a little bit. And the other drawback could be if we have an elected mayor, but we are already setting up the models that he's going to have to fit into. So, well, that mayor perhaps will feel that their hands are tied already before they've had a chance to look at everything. They should have the opportunity to examine the possibilities and perhaps have some input into how the other areas which are going to be under the command of the elected mayor are going to be functioning under his leadership. So I agree with Martin's, proposal here that we need to investigate that possibility, whether we could work together with Arrowash, Amber Valley, and have a slightly larger. But it will all depend on the kind of model the new elected mayor want to see in place, and that will have implications, because if we are going to get more devolved powers at the unitary authority, I don't see the need, and there is nothing explicit in the report which says the government is going to abolish Derby and the unitary authority in any case. I think there is a hint at it that that's the government's preference, but there is no suggestion that the government have already decided to abolish unitary authorities which are smaller in size than the preferred kind of numbers or the size. So can I just get some clarification for you on my thoughts on those issues, Paul, before perhaps coming back a bit later?
Wow. Yeah. If I knew the answer to your first question as to whether or not it was a certainty that we were going to get the elected mayor, then I probably wouldn't be sat here. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that question. I think one thing I will say is one of the suggestions as to why the white paper might be delayed, and this is subjecture and conjecture on my part, so please don't read too much into this. But one of the suggestions as to why the white paper might be delayed is the government may be rethinking that very question. And so the models that we've got in parts of, as I described earlier, so if you look at the West Midlands, they've got an elected mayor, they've got, I think, 9 metropolitan authorities that effectively work with the elected mayor in the West Midlands. So those authorities still do the vast majority of the things that they've always done. And one of the things that I know, having spoken to a number of the chief execs over there, is, they kind of swallowed hard. They didn't want an elected mayor either, but they saw the benefits of it. And they use that phrase, they swallowed hard, and actually it's paid dividends for them, because what that's led to is additional powers, additional recognition, and crucially additional resources for large-scale investment in the West Midlands. And we've seen some of that obviously occurring in recent years. So that's the model that we would work. The mayor wouldn't necessarily have a say in the structures beneath them. Local authorities would exist as sovereign bodies in their own right. They would then work with an elected mayor for an area. Or what is being suggested is perhaps the other model is, rather than it being a mayor, which, as Lucy said earlier, some people aren't necessarily a fan of, you could have a kind of super leader model. That's one of the other things that's potentially being considered, and as I say, that's perhaps one of the reasons it's being suggested why the white paper is being delayed, in addition to the challenges that clearly we're all facing at the moment dealing with COVID, and of course Brexit, and all those things taken together are putting a lot of pressure on civil service capacity, hence why they're perhaps now saying that perhaps the timing isn't right to do it right here, right now. So the structure of local government would fundamentally be the same. There may need to be some ceding of powers to an elected mayor, but fundamentally the local authorities would exist as sovereign bodies in their own right. The mayor wouldn't have any kind of say about how they were structured or organised. What the government have said is that they would prefer unitary authorities of a certain size rather than, and sorry to sound kind of blunt about it, but if you think about it, whether you agree with it or not, it's far easier if you've got somebody like an elected mayor or a leader to deal with, say, 6 other leaders and 6 other cabinets rather than 20 other leaders and 20 other cabinets, which is what we've got at the minute. So in terms of the complication and how difficult it is to navigate, that is one of the reasons why the government are proposing having more unitary authorities rather than, now I'm not saying I'm necessarily supporting that, I'm simply saying that's one of the reasons, the rationale they're using to justify it.
So I'm saying this tongue in cheek. It's about like me saying I want to be a benign dictator, as long as I'm that dictator. Anyway, that was tongue in cheek.
You can say that, Martin. I possibly couldn't.
Okay, that was free. Any more comments at all, please? Well, we've got a recommendation that I put forward, and Councillor Kerr's amended it.
I've indicated I'd like to speak. I don't know if you first saw it.
No, sorry, I didn't, Rob. Sorry, come in, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to this discussion very intently, because it's a very important part of the city moving forward. A lot of what's been discussed we're not quite sure about yet. I think the CEO Paul Simpson's really highlighted that, and a lot of the questions are quite varied, and asking around different angles on this whole LGR situation goes to show that that we need some clarity and we need some clarification. I know that there is discussions ongoing with the relevant cabinet member down in Westminster and Whitehall, all those sorts of places, and I do look forward to actually having some more clarity on this. But I listened to what you said earlier, Chair, and it really did interest me. I heard you saying that this needs to be slowed down and take time and think about it. Now, that is completely the opposite to what your deputy leader said recently, saying that things are taking far too long, or words to that effect. I just find that very interesting, and I will really think on that about why there's such a difference in views on this, and maybe that's reflective of people's views across the board. But I think as a city council, we need to get ahead of the game here. We need to think about what could come around the corner, and as I've already said, we need that clarity on that. But we need to work on that and reach out to those councils around us, find out what's in their local community's interest, who they would like to work with, what kind of area they would like to work in, and I think it's a really important piece of work. My final point, Chair, is this: I'd like to reach out to Councillor Willoughby. He's put on his additional things for the recommendation, talking about independent councillors or representative of an independent councillors to a working group. I think by the very definition of an independent councillor, and I believe we've got 4 now, is that they are independent members of the City Council, not tied to a group. So I find it very difficult to understand how a representative of such independent-minded people, you know, by its very the name and of those councils being independent from all groups, how they could possibly be a representative of all of them, because I'm sure they would have different views and you know, they've got different outlooks and different duties of care to each other than, you know, the substantive political groups that we normally work with. Just want to see if Councillor Willoughby would like to reconsider that wording and his rationale behind it, please, Chair, if he would be willing to do so.
Yeah, I'll just respond to you, Rob. I mean, certainly with regard to our Deputy Leader, I think she shares the concerns that I've expressed, so I'm not sure what you're referring to. But I've got a question for you, Rob. Did your leader discuss, before he wrote to the government minister, did he discuss what he wrote with you? Rob, are you there?
In what regards, Martin?
Well, did your leader discuss with you the content of what he sent to the government minister concerning these proposals?
I believe he sent that letter as the leader of the City Council. Would you like to enlighten us on what he said?
Yeah, I just wondered if he discussed it with you or not, Rob.
I'm sure the leader of the City Council writes a lot of letters, but if you could just tell me what was in the letter, it might jog my memory.
Well, that's what I'm asking, about what we've just been talking about proposed reorganisation, Rob. Can you remember whether he talked to you about it or not?
The leader of the City Council has already responded to that, hasn't he?
No, I just wondered, did he discuss it with you? Okay, all right, we'll have to leave that hanging in there. Right, okay, yeah, sorry, early on, my recommendation, it was amended by Councillor Willoughby. I think Councillor Hudson wants to come in. Richard, you would like to come in?
Hi, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to reiterate something what Paul's actually brought up. I was under the illusion that this had been kicked into the long grass. That's just based on other things what I had heard. So I was actually surprised when I saw this, because I'd heard mutterings of that before I saw this document. By allowing this to progress at this point, we're actually getting ahead of that white paper. There's no harm in doing that at this point. But even then, until that white paper drops, we don't actually know what we're dealing with. So even though we're going down this route, this could actually be almost irrelevant at this point. So there isn't any harm in actually going through this. The bits I'm reading here, and I take on board what Lucy has said, what yourself has said, and Stephen, that's for the next bit. When we've got the white paper and we've got what's actually in this, which then we're looking at, what you're looking at there is around next May. If that bridges the gap, I was under the illusion this had been, because like Paul's already said, they're completely swamped with what probably is around the corner.
Yeah, Richard, I think the fear is that we, as elected members, have a duty to, as Councillor Pegg says, there's 260,000 residents in the city who have their own views on this. We should be trying to reflect and spend the time to reflect those before we let it get to the stage of a white paper. I believe it's too late, or it could be too late by then, and others share those concerns as well. I'm just, as you indicated, Richard, I'm bound to ask you the same things I did Rob. Did the leader of the council discuss what he when he wrote to the minister, what he proposed? Did he discuss it with you before he sent it?
There was discussion at the time between our group, that is true, but the exact detail wasn't discussed. That's what, from everything what people were picking up, and I'll be very honest, I wasn't expecting to see this. I wouldn't have even been surprised if it was kicked into the long grass with everything else what's going off.
Right, okay. Thanks very much, Richard.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thanks a lot for that, and thanks, Rob. And right, Lucy, back to you, please.
Thank you. Just a point from what Richard was saying, I think that we need to do this work now. It's likely to be happening, and a lot of what we do in terms of looking at how Derby works best and where its boundaries ought to be is going to be useful for the future, whatever happens to this white paper. But in terms of the time frame of a white paper, if we were to wait until it's been printed and published before we actually take any action, then any consultation that we are able to do would be exceedingly hurried, and we would have little opportunity for proper engagement with people or review of suggestions that are coming forward. I am sympathetic to the capacity of the council at the moment to deal with everything that it's doing. And my understanding from this is that in paragraph 4.6, it talks about by commissioning resource to prepare an initial business case. And I'm presuming from that we're talking about additional staff or people or consultants or whatever to come in and be doing that work. Maybe that's something that Paul could clarify. And I expect somewhere at the bottom under financial considerations, there might even be a budget set for this, but if not, it'd be interesting to know what the budget would be. Well, we've got this £100,000 over 2 years. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks very much, Dr. Rob wanted to come back in. Yeah, I was waiting for Stephen to come back. Stephen, I think Rob's posed the question that he raised a point and wanted you to respond to. I don't know if you wish to respond or not, Stephen.
Well, it's look at the record of what I've written there. It says that I think it's just like a representative, isn't it? It's to sort of keep it as a smallish working group where there being four independents, and one of them can quite easily take back the view of that working group and seek out the view of the others. Just like I know they're not a political group, but just like in any other political group, we know that in his own political group there's a varied group of opinions. I can say that from personal experience, of course, and these things will be debated robustly. And I'm sure that, unlike it seems from his own group leader, who hasn't had that much of a consultation with his members of his group, which is typical from my experience, that the independent person will actually consult their group and come to a collective view. Because I know certainly Councillor Skelton, or whoever represents my own group now, would do exactly the same. So I think it was just to try and keep it simple, really, Chair, and just to have a group of different people. And they're not a political group, obviously, but they can go back and garner opinion on the proposals from the others, and represent people. It's after what democracy is, as Councillor Pegg said. We represent, 51 of us represent sort of 250,000 odd residents in the city, all with varied views, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think it's close to 300,000 actually, rather than 250,000. But but there we go. Paul's smiling on that. Right. Okay. So we've got the recommendation as amended by Stephen. Stephen Mason, I think I'd like to put that to the meeting for us to vote on. Is that okay? Stephen, have you got that?
Hi, Chair. Just give me a second. Let me bring that up now and turn my camera on. Excuse me. Right, Chair. So this is the we have one from yourself amended with additions from Councillor Willoughby, and then we have the one from Councillor Kerr. So we have two. Yeah. So I need to read out the first one, of course.
Okay.
Chair,
Cabinet.
Sorry, Chair. Just before Stephen does that, I think Councillor Kerr asked a question which I'm not sure I've been given the opportunity to respond to.
Oh, sorry, Paul. Okay.
So Councillor Kerr asked a question about the resources, and she's absolutely right. There was a budget agreed back in February for 2 years of funding for local government review, 50,000 a year, and she's absolutely right. We would be looking to bring in some extra resource. We've got somebody identified who's got experience of working on devolution deals, those kind of things. That person will be working maybe about 1 day a week in October, and possibly about 3 days a week in November through to the completion of the business case. And we may need to have some additional kind of policy support to help with the number crunching and those kind of things, which obviously will be important. Sorry to interrupt Stephen's, but I thought Councillor Kerr wanted that response. The other thing, just to finish, in terms of the timeline, there isn't. I don't think there is specific mention about other councils, but clearly that will be an integral and fundamental part of the consultation strategy going forward, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Sorry to cut you off in your prime. Okay, right. But back to Stephen Mason now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I'll read through the recommendation. Cabinet to set up a cross-party working group consisting of the group leader of each political group or a delegate and a representative of the independent councillors to develop the proposed options for local government reform in Derby, to be subject to support from partner authorities and public consultation. This is to consider, alongside other options, the viability and possibility of extending the City Council's border to include areas such as that part of Stenson Fields that is currently in South Derbyshire and the new developments on our borders at Mickleover, Mackworth and Allestry, as well as potentially looking at Borrowash. All of these communities identify with and use City Council facilities, services and roads. These areas would potentially make a more natural fit than trying to absorb Amber Valley, Erewash and South Derbyshire.
Thank you very much, Stephen. So what I'd like to do is put that to the vote. Stephen, do you want people just to indicate with their hands? Or?
Councillor Upton, it's Emily. May I just make a quick comment, please?
Yeah, sure.
It's worth noting, Councillor Upton, that under the legislation as it stands at the current time, obviously things may change under the white paper, the consultation just has to present options to the people of Derby. It can't put any preference as to which of the options would be a preferred model by the council. So the options all have to be set out, but with no preference for any of them. I'm slightly concerned that your recommendation would actually be proposing a preference that would not be acceptable in the event to move forward within the consultation. I think members have to understand that the options would have to be neutral at this point.
Well, in fairness, Emily, I think it just says it's to consider alongside other options, and that's all options, the viability and possibility. It's adding a number of caveats. And I think, Emily, I wouldn't want us to get bogged down in procedure, because this is important. It's very important to me as a local councillor, for all of us, that we're open and transparent, and I think we ought to take a consideration of this. And I think we ought to vote on it as it is, because as it says, it's to consider alongside all recommendations. It has no preference at all. I mean, I'm quite happy to add that this does not indicate a preference. So, Stephen, can you add to my recommendation, please, at the bottom? This is not to indicate any preference at all. Okay,
the Chair has also indicated a slight addition to it as well, Chair. I'll let her come in, obviously, but
yeah, okay. So you can add that, please, Stephen. Okay, so, over to you, Steve Willoughby now. Yeah.
Sorry, it's Lucy Kerr.
Lucy, sorry.
Just to say that after the list of places like Mickleover and Stenson Fields, just to say, and sufficient land to allow for city growth over the next 30 to 50 years, so that South Derbyshire and Amber Valley don't immediately plonk more houses that we haven't got control over, which then we get back to the situation we're in now.
Yes, so it's not too prescriptive. Can you add that, please, Stephen? But then add what I said at the very bottom about, so we actually state quite clearly that, you know, we're not indicating any preference whatsoever, but just giving just one of many possible examples.
Chair, I'm just adding in
Thank you.
Councillor Kerr's bit here first of all, because it's getting lengthier, so I want to make sure I've got this correct.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, can I just come in?
I think
I'm just trying to clarify a point, because this recommendation is for the Cabinet. This is not going to go out directly to the public for consultation.
Also,
So what
government,
we're
yeah.
asking the cabinet is to bear in mind that we have we're asking you to look into to this option alongside other options.
Absolutely, it's an
We're not
internal
actually
document.
dependent at this stage that this option is to be consulted with the public.
Yeah, because otherwise it's almost like saying
just trying to answer Emily's concerns.
Yeah, I think you're right, because otherwise it's like saying, well, you can't even talk about it, or you can't even think about it, because then if we don't put it in writing, then to capture what we've talked about and thought about, how can we do it justice? Because you say, this is just going to the Cabinet tomorrow night for to consider. So, Stephen, do you want to take us through it, please?
Chair, first of all, I need to add in your addition, please. So I'm presuming that you want to put your addition in at the end, Chair.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
And can you read that out to me, please, Chair, so I can add that in now?
Yeah. This example does not indicate any preference whatsoever.
Thank you. I think it might be, if you're all in agreement, I think it might be worthwhile me just going through this now. I've added in the two additions.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Is that okay?
Take it from the top.
Okay. Cabinet to set up a cross-party working group consisting of the group leader of each political group or a delegate and a representative of the independent councillors to develop the proposed options for local government reform in Derby, to be subject to support from partner authorities and public consultation. This is to consider, alongside other options, the viability and possibility of extending the City Council's borders to include areas such as that part of Stenson Fields that is currently in South Derbyshire and the new developments on our borders at Mickleover, Mackworth and Allestry, as well as potentially looking at Borrowash, and sufficient land to allow for city growth over the next 30 to 50 years. All of these communities identify with and use City Council facilities, services and roads. These areas would potentially make a more natural fit than trying to absorb Amber Valley, Erewash and South Derbyshire. This example does not indicate any preference whatsoever.
Thank you very much. Okay, right. I want to put that to the vote. Yeah, thank you. To the vote now.
Okay.
Can you, those in favour, please indicate.
Would you like me to go through the members,
yes,
Chair?
Thank you. Yeah.
I just want to check, first of all, Chair, that I haven't got Councillor Evans on the call or Councillor Patterson. No? Right, okay, I'll go ahead. Councillor Kerr, please.
I support that, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Cooper, please.
Abstain.
Abstain. Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Hudson, please.
I'll abstain on that one.
Thank you, Councillor Hudson. Councillor Hussain, please.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Councillor Paul Pegg, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Testro, please.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Willoughby, please.
I'm for it, please. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, yourself, Chair.
Without any preference, I'm for it.
Thank you. So that's 5 in favour and 3 abstentions.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Right, okay, that's that item. Moving on now to...
Chair, I think we have Councillor Kerr's recommendation now.
Oh, sorry, okay.
So if I have this correct, Councillor Kerr, I'll just read through this. To recommend to Cabinet that the principles of democracy, accountability, transparency, community and identity are as important at business and value for money when putting together the case for the future geography of local government, and should be included centrally in the brief and consultation for the proposed future report.
Just a quick typo there, it should say as business, not at business.
Thank you.
Okay. Shall we move to the vote then, Stephen?
Okay, Chair, thank you. Just give me a moment.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Kerr, please.
Yes, I'll support that.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Hudson, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hussain, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Pegg, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Testro, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Willoughby.
4, please.
Thank you. And finally, yourself, Chair.
Without prejudice, 4.
Thank you. So that's unanimous in favour.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
A good debate, and that's what local democracy is about. Long may it reign. Item 10, contract and financial procedure matters. Who's taking us through this, please, Stephen?
I am Chair, Simon Riley, Strategic Director of Corporate Resources.
Thank you, Simon. Welcome.
So, thank you. This report is the normal catch-up with contract and financial procedure rules. There's four items that we're seeking your approval on. One is acceptance of grant for the opportunity area, which is an extension of the successful opportunity area programme that's been operating since 2016, and it's an amount of 1.43 million, which I hope members reading the report will see the value of accepting that funding. The public health nursing contract is the existing 5-year nursing contract, and you can see there the reason we're asking for an extension to that is the result of the COVID pandemic and the need to effectively have this in place, and there would not be enough time to find an alternative provider, so hopefully members will see through the report the benefit of that service being extended. Within the public health budget, there's a proposal here to enter into a new contract for service delivery for an integrated sexual health service for a period of 12 months with the potential to extend for a further 12 months and to delegate various authorities as detailed in the report, and funding is within the public health grant. And then the Safer Streets funding, again, just the report highlights Office of Police and Crime Commissioner proposal in respect of CCTV and to be targeted in the West End of Derby, and again it's about asking for Cabinet approval, if approved, to enter into Safer Streets funding to install CCTV in the area of City of Darley ward and to enter into the associated funding agreement. So that, Chair, is detailed in the report. Happy to take any questions along with other officers on the Skype call.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Thank you very much for that, Simon. I mean, it's no criticism for anybody here this evening, I think, but and it's great news, absolutely great news, as a ward councillor, that CCTV is going into an area of need in the city centre. It's just a shame that Office of the City Council didn't consult with local councillors alongside discussing it with the Police and Crime Commissioner. I mean, I've spoken to the Police and Crime Commissioner, and he apologised for that, but he did say, I assume that council officers would discuss that with you and local councillors. But look, let's draw a line under that. Let's learn from that about good communication and move on, because it is good news, and I really welcome it. Any other comments at all, please? We've got Steve Willoughby and Paul Pegg. Steve, and then Paul Pegg, please.
Sorry, I didn't turn the microphone on. Sorry, Chair. So I've been notes in front of me as well, in front of me on the screen here. Yeah, I'm just concerned. Obviously, all the funding and additional funding and stuff is to be welcome, but putting my Chair of Audit hat on, I'm just concerned. Am I picking up that we sort of seem to be waiving the sort of normal procurement rules here for a number of these items? Okay, and therefore will we be then getting a number of waivers? So I've got a number of questions, Chair, around that theme, because it's each one is wavering it or wants to deviate it from it's subtly different. So I'm just going to ask ask a question on each item. So first of all, you've got section 4.5 onwards to I suppose 4.9, the opportunity area delegated approval. So it's, will the council be going through the normal procurement tendering processes, even though they are planning to delegate this? And if not, how likely is it that a waiver will be raised for this? We then move down to the next one, which is a public health nursing contract from sort of say point 410 to 413. So again, how likely is it that there'll be a waiver for this? And how has the COVID pandemic been used as a rationale for not following the council's normal procurement processes, as indeed I think you indicate, particularly in paragraph 411, which is my concern. And then again, the Derby Integrated Sexual Health Service contract from 414 to down to paragraph 416. Just interested to know yet again, why is this contract not being actually put out to competitive tender again? When that's supposed to be what's in the procurement processes. And actually, if it's just a little aside, Chair, if you'll bear me a moment, we've only just recently considered at the audit, and Councillor Kerr would say this, would sort of remember this as well. We've only just recently considered at the audit and accounts something that came to light, a massive waiver for those Christmas present decorations that appeared in the market place last year, where again, for various reasons, they didn't follow, because it was the only provider, is what they claimed. They didn't actually follow the normal procurement processes, and that was for a vast sum of money and quite a significant sum of money. So that is really my concern here. And then finally, Chair, specifically around from point sort of the final section on the safer street funding, 4.17, and again you mentioned about the lack of engagement with initial engagement, obviously, Chair, with local ward councils, of which of course you are one. Again, what sort of, just out of interest for this contract, what procurement and waiver processes are again being followed for this contract? I'm hoping that I'll hear the answer that there won't be waivers and that they'll be following the normal procurement rules, and I'm worrying unnecessarily. But I'd be just interested to know on each of these, Chair, the view of the officers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Simon, do you want to come back, please, on a number of issues that Stephen's raised? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Willoughby. The report does detail the reasons why we feel that a particular procurement route is required, and some of it is, as you can see, in respect of a public health contract, the ability to commission a normal competitive tendering process and the demands on our public health team. We are minded that that one is about getting the service in place for the forthcoming year, and it would not have been possible with all the other demands for that to have been commissioned and sort of in the period to be put a new contract in place by 2020. In respect of the Derby Integrated Sexual Health Service, there's also the demands on our public health section, but it's also in the report it does talk about the city's current provider of sexual health treatment is best placed to do that, so we would do the appropriate waiver at that point in time. In terms of the opportunity area, obviously this report is about creating the approval to accept the 1.43 million, and we will, within the relevant delegations and procedures that we have, look to sort of commence appropriate tendering processes. And the final one, again, Councillor Willoughby, is around the this is funding that has been, in a sense, given from the OPCC targeted to a particular area, and that's we'll follow our appropriate processes in discharging the spend on that funding. So there's a mixture there of responses. Some is capacity, which makes sense to roll over or extend a contract. Some will have normal commissioning and procurement processes applied, and waivers in line with our contract procedure rules will be exercised as and when required, but waivers aren't the default option.
Thank you, Simon. If you have I'll go to Lucy just a second, Stephen. If you want to come back later, I'll leave that option open to you. Lucy, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you. Mine was a question specifically about the CCTV. It doesn't seem very long ago when we were taking down CCTV because we didn't have the revenue capacity to go on monitoring it and to be looking after it and dealing with it in that way. And I was wondering how that was going to be managed. There's a talk about a small amount of revenue funding, which seems to be mostly to do with maintenance, not with ongoing monitoring capacity. And our existing budget for that area, is there sufficient capacity there for this CCTV to be going in as well?
Simon, over to you.
I believe we've got Andy Thomas on the call, so he might be able to give you an operational answer, but the CCTV capacity would allow that to happen, I believe. But Andy, do you want to clarify that?
Yeah, we have a maintenance budget and we have a revenue budget. The revenue budget is a mixture of council, police and crime commissioner and police funding, not an awful lot per year, but we have enough coverage to satisfy our needs and demands. And we have a capital CCTV budget in terms of ongoing costs. But one of the beauties of this scheme is it's all new kit, so we don't envisage an awful lot of costs over and above electric and stuff that we can incorporate into our existing contract with the people who look after the kit.
Thank you very much, Andy.
We're confident.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Stephen, you wanted to come back in?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, very much. Yes, I'm realising what he's saying. It's to try and sort of, get the stuff in place. But if we look at the recommendations, Chair, in sort of 2.1, particularly C and D, it's talking about extending it for 24 months or whatever. And I just wondered, I presume it's extending it from what we've read in here, or to get it in place. But why not over that sort of 12-month period? And I appreciate people keep saying it's the unprecedented COVID and everything. Why not in those sort of 12, in that initial year or so, or maybe that period, don't we actually put this out to a proper competitive tender within that period and then award it properly as a more long-term contract? Because I think we audit and accounts, we have seen a number of waivers falling. I am concerned about the sort of use of waivers here and this sort of delegation that seems to be happening to officers as well. So I'm just wondering why we can't maybe build into that a chance to put it out as more for more competitive a more competitive tender while we've awarded that contract, but then put it out to proper competitive tender as well, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Emily, you'd like to come in?
I was just going to comment, Chair and Councillor Willoughby, that the routes that are being proposed here, so at C, in the recommendations which Councillor Willoughby referred to, we will be issuing a VEET notice that essentially provides you with a legitimate procurement route and no requirement for a waiver at that point. So these routes have been confirmed as legitimate from a procurement perspective there.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much. Do you have anything to add, Simon, at all on that, or are you quite happy?
Emily's given the procurement advice in line with our contract procedure rules and everything else.
Okay, thanks very much. Anybody else want to contribute? If not, I think Paul some time ago said to note the report.
Chair, can I just ask whether Steve Willoughby would support a recommendation to Cabinet to set in train the process of longer term contracts as appropriate for those contract extensions currently being proposed?
Stephen?
Yes, I would, absolutely. I mean, I'd sort of tabled a load of detailed recommendations on that, but that sort of sums it up what I was going to say in a sort of more more simple way. And I think that expresses my my concerns. And I appreciate what the officers have said, that they're not going for waivers, they're going down this other contract route. And I might ask a few more questions about that later, as whether we can study those audit and accounts. But that's not for this meeting, obviously. But I think yes, I would absolutely support it. Thanks, Chair.
Right. Okay. So in simple terms, this is just to give better and greater scrutiny. That's right, Stephen, is it? Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. I think it's what we're about, isn't it, Chair? Really.
Yeah. Understand. Okay. Right, Stephen. Can you take that recommendation, please, and put it to the vote?
Just give me a moment, Chair. Turn my camera on. Right, Chair. So I have a much shorter recommendation to read out this time. To recommend to Cabinet to set in train the process of longer term contracts as appropriate for those contract extensions currently being proposed. And if I go through the list of members, Chair, Councillor Kerr, please.
Yes, I support that.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Cooper, please.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Hudson, please.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Councillor Hussain, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Pegg, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Testro, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Willoughby, please.
Oh, sorry, for.
Thank you, Councillor Willoughby. And finally, yourself, Chair.
For. Thank you.
Thank you. Unanimous in favour, Chair.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you very much for that. Moving on now to item 11, which is the, I think it's the exclusion of the press and the public, isn't it, Stephen?
That's right, Chair. Did you want me to go through that for you?
If you would, thank you.
Okay, Chair. So this is to consider a resolution that under Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following items on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 and 7 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information.
Thank you very much.
Do we have all members in agreement?
Yeah, everybody in favour? Shout up if anybody objects to that, please.
Yeah, fine.
Thank you. I just need to now, a couple of things for me to sort out. First of all, just wait for my colleague, it's Lindsay, I think. Yes, it's Lindsay, or Alex, to indicate that the live broadcast has ended.